Hey everybody, welcome back to Horror Trans. I am Stephanie Bree. I am a transgender woman and I talk about all things horror. And today I'm tackling the 2003 Platinum Dunes Texas Chainsaw Massacre remake. This was the first of a series of Platinum Dunes remakes, and, well, one of the most prolific of all of them. And probably the best, if we're going to get technical. I say probably because I have not, as of yet, seen all of them, but it's the best of the ones I have seen. So there is that. But the best of a pile of turds doesn't necessarily make it a good movie, right? Well, let's talk about it. I'm not going to give you the plot points because this is, by and large, the same plot as the 1974 Tobe Hooper film, with a few subtle differences and a couple of alterations, but it's essentially the same movie. Essentially, as in, the basic plot and the main beats are the same. But it's not a shot for shot, scene for scene remake. They do take liberties with it. And I'm not going to really get into the liberties necessarily. Broadly speaking, I'm going to say this movie takes more risks than the original. It's more... the original, I classify as a proto-horror. Specifically a proto-slasher. Meaning it is technically a horror movie. Although by today's standards of what we classify horror, it might be more accurate to call it a horror thriller, if you want to get down to it, because the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre is more of an art film, whereas the 2003 Platinum Dunes Texas Chainsaw is a pure, polished, straight-up horror through and through. That's not to say either style is better than the other. Now, between the two, I've already talked about Chainsaw 1974. So you already know I'm a big fan of that movie. I really like it. And I've already talked about the Netflix Chainsaw Massacre, which I am also a big fan. This movie is the first Texas Chainsaw I ever saw. I saw it when I was probably 20 or 21 years old, right when it came out on video. And it traumatized me. I can't say the same thing about the other Chainsaw Massacre movies. They were creepy, horrific, and scary in their own right. Absolutely. Especially the 74 original. But this is the one that fucked me up. And it started with that bus scene where the girl blows her brains out. That really traumatized me. In fact, the first time I watched this movie, I turned it off right there, and I didn't give it another go until I was with a group of friends in a well-lit room with popcorn and soda pops, and I was like, okay, I can watch this in the safety of my friends. I was not going to watch this movie alone. And I loved it. I have since picked it up on DVD and watched it a few additional times, and having watched other movies that are more gruesome than this, having seen, let's say, for example, the Saw franchise and Human Centipede and other things of that nature, I'm a little more desensitized. So this movie isn't as shocking to me now as it was the first time I tried to watch it. Which means I can appreciate it more now than I could back then. And I am a big fan of this movie. I enjoy this movie a lot. Like I said, of the Platinum Dunes movies I have seen, this is probably the best. I am a fan of this movie. I think it's a really good movie. This is a polished, professional, modern reinterpretation of Texas Chainsaw Massacre. So what this is this movie shows you everything the first movie made you imagine in your own mind. And while in some regards, that may make the original a scarier picture. I think this one's more interesting in that you get to see these gruesome kills, and they're done really well. It's a gory movie. This is a fucking gory movie. I have a couple of complaints about this movie, though. Complaint number one is it's too polished. This does not look like it takes place in 1974, even though it's supposed to. The costumes and the set pieces and the vehicles and the set dressing, etc., are relatively period accurate from what I've seen of this of the period. I was not alive in the 70s, so I have very little to go on. But the lighting, the colors, the texture, the pacing, the editing is decidedly not 1970s. Very much early 2000s. Now, I have not dug too deep into the early 2000s horror on this channel yet, and I hesitate to make blanket statements, but I'm not a big fan of that overly polished, overly produced look for a horror movie. I prefer grittier, indier looking fare. And while overall, as a whole, by and large, I am a fan of modern technology. I prefer digital special effects and using digital instead of film. And I do prefer CGI over practical because I think practical has limitations. And I think that when done right, a film should use both. It should use whatever, let me rephrase that. It should use whatever method is best to tell that story. So use practical where necessary, CGI where necessary, optical where necessary, etc. That being said, when it comes to horror in particular, specifically, I prefer film and I prefer a grainier look. And while I'm fine with CGI ghosts or supernatural special effects and things of that sort, because it's really hard to do ghosts and things like that, demons and things, practically, and even say something like The Thing, which is about as good as you can get doing practical effects, I would prefer to see that movie done using CGI, because I think you can get away with more and you can make it scarier, because practical has limitations that CGI does not. But when it comes to horror, I tend to fall in the whatever's best for the film, do that, but use practical if you can get away with it, and then use CGI when you can't. That's how I feel about horror, by and large. This movie does both, I believe, and it does a really good job. However, this movie, the other problem I have with this movie is the lead actress, Jessica Biel. For starters, I'm not a fan of this actress. I do not like the TV show she did to become famous. I'm not going to talk about it or even mention it because I hate that TV show. And I don't think she has the look of the final girl in this movie. I think she looks too, for lack of a better descriptor, 2000s. She does not look 1970s at all. She looks out of place in this picture. So those are my two big gripes with this movie. That being said, I do recommend it. It is still a buy. It is still the best of the Platinum Dunes movies that I have seen. And one of the better Texas Chainsaw films that I have seen. Not the best, but I still enjoy it tremendously. Having gone back and revisited the first one again recently and then revisited this one subsequently, I'm currently of the mindset that I do, as of right now, prefer the original to this one, but I still enjoy this one enough to own it and recommend it. I think this is one you should definitely check out. So this is a buy, an absolute buy. This is good enough. You'll probably bust it out more than once, from time to time. It might not be your go-to chainsaw, but it'll be one that you can throw in as an alternative from time to time.